Just a few opening questions, and I'll yield to my distinguished colleagues. And again, your full statements really are helpful to this subcommittee because you have taken the time to give us a very broad look. Obviously, time didn't permit each of you to say everything in your paper, but I can assure you I read it, and I know members of the subcommittee will do likewise. So thank you so much for that. Let me just ask Dr. Friedman, you mentioned that all firms entering Africa, the African market, now have to compete with China. And I'm wondering if, you know, there's a number of issues, and all of you might want to speak to this, but I have been baffled, frankly. I've been here 33 years. We know that much of the content of what we deal with in terms of our policy, first it was the Soviet and the proxies there between ourselves and the USSR, but now it's been, you know, a focus on PEPFAR, the malaria, TB, the wars in Sudan, obviously the problems in DR Congo. I mean, we've been crisis managers, if you will, how well or poorly is up to the judgment of history, but there has been a genuine compassion and concern on both sides of the aisle through various presidencies to try to help out and to be a real force for good. But I wonder sometimes if the branding of Africa in the mind's eye of the Americans becomes one of crisis after crisis after crisis, inhibiting and chilling investment. And Mr. Hansen, you talked about the need for investment. So I'm wondering how we change that perception. It would seem to me that an exporting strategy, which is why we're doing this bill or trying to promote it and get it passed, will finally say it's in America's interest, but it's also the more robust the give and take between the African countries and the U.S. are, the better, you know, the rising tide will lift all those boats. But this idea of the branding, you know, I've been to Africa many times. It is a wonderful place to visit. Even when we go to difficult places, they're usually like difficult places here or any other country in the world. You know, there's also a number of oases everywhere you go where people are living their lives, their children are growing, and, you know, opportunities, if they could get more, would mean that they have a greater quality of life. So I'm wondering if you could speak to the branding issue. Why hasn't, Mr. Hansen, the investment actually occurred? Is it because of that? Is it not easy to get financing on the stock markets, you know, or ETFs not, you know, sufficiently including, you know, Africa businesses? If you could start off with that, I'd appreciate it. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman Smith. It's a complex question. I think as to the branding issue, I've written that if Asia gets CNBC, Africa is relegated to the late-night murder segments of the local news, I'm afraid. I think journalists love to go out there with their flak jackets and go in for Pulitzers, and they don't want to report on Ghana's explosive growth. They don't want to report on the quiet places of Africa, the vast, vast tracts of Africa that are quiet and ready to prosper. They want Somalia, and they don't even talk, when they talk about Mogadishu, it's Black Hawk Down type stuff. It's not that the Turks are coming in and investing at a tremendous clip. So I think what Africa simply needs is normality from the U.S. perspective. I think the U.S. needs to treat Africa as it would treat Asia, as it would treat Mexico, as it would treat Latin America. It should no longer be a plaything of the United States, and particularly the United States government and the United States aid industry. It simply needs to have protections put in for business and a tone, however the U.S. government wants to promote that would be great, but a tone that it's simply open for business and ready to work. I think that's everything. And I believe Ms. Freeman has some other insights.
Well, actually, my comment will go beyond the branding and to the issue of strategy. You know, a long time ago, we used to put out in hard copy a very big book called the U.S. Industrial Outlook. And it used to analyze very, very clearly, you know, what America's standing was in respect to a whole host of products and industry. We used to have 17 major sectors of our economy, and we have actually trade committees still in each of these 17 areas. So the issue is, how do we actually understand ourselves and our economic growth and the basis for it industrially? China understands it very well. So when they look at the pharmaceutical industry or the automotive industry, they look at that from every strategic point of view: supply, demand, inputs, outputs, whatever it is, and then they say, okay, where can we get that from? You know, where does Africa play into this? So yes, we have commercial strategies and policies, but are they strategic enough? Are we understanding where we're going economically to understand, therefore, the role that the assets that Africa has can play into that? And that's very much on a product and industry sector basis. We no longer produce these industrial outlooks. And I would say that we have more information right now that's available to us through the internet, but we have less knowledge and less understanding. If you ask us where are we going in any sector, computers, pharmaceuticals, you name it, where is there a unified approach and understanding of how we grow? What are the inputs for that? So let's take it outside the framework of how we feel about Africa. China's not worried about how they feel about Africa. They're talking about, you know, what can we get? When we look at our Prius cars, where's the input for those batteries come from? It comes from the Congo. Okay, Chinese don't have any feelings about the Congo. They're saying, let me get that titanium or whatever you make those batteries out of. So we need to go back to that U.S. industrial outlook approach and understand now where we're going industrially or even in the service industries and see what plays into that. Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Very short. One of the challenges you face as a committee is that you look at Africa, you have a budget for U.S. aid, we go up there. But there's a big difference between the humanitarian needs of Africa, which will be serious, the problems in Mali, which are serious, and economic growth, which is as much in the U.S. commercial interest as they are. So my only suggestion, which Manchester Trade has made a few times now, and so I know he's been, is differentiate. You know, just say economic growth. This is our interest. Let's see how much money we can put into it. Let's see how we can work, and we're going to get that back. The good things we do, continue doing, and no one says you shouldn't do. PEPFAR, a great success. I mean, God. But having said that, I think it's this differentiation. One of the points, for example, we always have, just mentioned it, but it's closer to your committee, MCC. MCC has an emphasis on poverty. We understand that. But also, MCC is the only institution in the United States today that focuses on infrastructure. And infrastructure are one of the 3 requirements for regional integration. One is doing away with trade barriers, 2 is infrastructure, and 3 is making the political decisions that you have to make to move in that direction. Well, why doesn't the MCC, as long as they get money, 20% regional infrastructure could be one of their requirements, working with, of course, the compact countries. So all I'm saying is that part of it might be able to be done by differentiating the economic growth stuff with the other stuff, because America has to do the other stuff, because as Sharon says, China will not do it. Thank you.
I have more. Oh, yes, please.
I have just a really specific and small recommendation, which is I've worked on some of the CODELs to Africa. And so what you see and what the pictures that come back are of the game parks, of, you know, the little village. I want to see the buildings. I want to see, you know, those kinds of things. That, just your visits and showing that, it can go a long way.
I do have other questions, but I will yield to my colleagues out of deference to them, and maybe if there's time, I'll come back to those questions. Ms. Beck.